Nicolas is the president of Renaissance Numérique. For the one who don't know Renaissance Numérique, because you're not French, he's one of the major think tanks on digital in France. And the reason we wanted morning is that Renaissance Numérique is about to publish a report on sovereignty and strategic autonomy. So we thought it would be a great introduction to our debate. Nicolas, can we be privileged and have a heads up of what you're going, or the main findings of your report before we turn to our other speakers to comment and to express what their approach in this regard?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Hello, everybody. And Samantha for having us this morning. Last year, 1 year ago, we launched a working group on digital sovereignty. There was a rising digital sovereignty agenda, especially in France. It's very connected to the COVID crisis. I don't have to explain the context, and Cecilia talked about it quite nicely. So we set up a working group, typical Renaissance Numérique way, because we got a diversity of actors like academics, small and large, national, international companies, European, American, non-European companies, NGOs, and some experts. And we tried to make a big focus on what would be this idea and to frame, understand, decompose this idea of European digital sovereignty. We did a lot of hearings. We established a state-of-the-art academic institutional literature and so on. And today I only had the first step in our reflection that we will publish in a few days, maybe. We're finishing at the moment, which is more defining the terms of the debate and the objectives that lay behind these terms for the EU. So I have, and the next step for us will be, of course, to think of solutions, strategy, and try to animate a discussion next year, especially during the French presidency, on this topic. So what are the main points that we have at the moment? I have four ideas that I want to share with you. The first is that this question of sovereignty is arising in a classic sense. The idea of sovereignty is a very European notion. It started with a French notion in a very French and English dialogue. I don't want to talk about Jean Baudin, Hobbes, and Locke, and Rousseau, who have been speaking about it. And we invite European actors to consider, European actors being economic or political, to consider this concept in its original sense in order to establish a clear objective for the European Union. Sovereignty evokes the power of member states to act or the power of being able. It is sometimes and very often confused between sovereignty and strategic autonomy, but they don't act, they don't operate at the same level. Strategic autonomy is both a means to and a dividend of sovereignty. And we think it can be really discussed on different steps. The point I wanted to, the issue at stake for us is more the impact of digital technologies on sovereignty, and it's not sovereignty in cyberspace. We think that technology is both a new context and a strategic layer in which we have to operate. It's a new strategic dimension in which we have to think, but it's not a strategic dimensions like any other. It's not land, sea, aerospace. It embraces all of them. And the mastery of this dimension makes it possible to regain sovereignty in other strategic dimensions. So we don't have to think of it like only sovereignty in cyberspace. And therefore, it brings me to the third idea, is that mastery of this digital strategic dimension is based on the mastery of the strategic layers of the digital technologies. That's why we would like to European technological sovereignty than only digital, because it's not only a matter of digital technology. It's more broadly, it embraces a number of critical technologies such as semiconductors and so on. Cecilia talked about it a little bit earlier. And the sovereignty issues that emerges in this number of layers in this value chain, from the raw materials necessary to manufacture chips to the exploitation of data to the use of digital services, is very transversal. And it is extremely important that the European Union should identify between the different layers and think of which are critical and essential to guarantee strategic autonomy. And the fourth idea that we have, which will lead to a conclusion, I'll try to make it short, is that for investment capacity reasons, there'll be technological sovereignty only at the community level. It's possible to question the relevance of aiming for European technological sovereignty. But we can only envision it at the European level. This raises a lot of questions on the link between the European Union and member states. Should they, will the member states want, should and will in strategic digital matters and should prevalence of subsidiary enshrined in the European Union law on this matter? So as a conclusion, we think that granting digital sovereignty is a policy of empowerment in a field of independence. It includes refusing or knowingly reducing some interdependencies in the name of an objective of sovereignty. It's therefore a matter of the European Union being sovereign without closing itself off. We also think that if the member states want to guarantee their technological sovereignty, it can only be European. It's no question of giving up national sovereignty. It's strengthening it by giving themselves to a collective means. But for this to happen, it's essential to get out of the confusion of the terms and to set up a clear path where economic challenges of digital technologies can conceal issues of a political and strategic nature. And they must be understood as is. And in the European Union, economic power is very often not thought to serve nations, not thought to serve political means, and they are not thought out politically. Technological and economic issues are not thought out politically. So we think of the United States that have developed a strategic approach to the economy. One talk about the FISA or the information superhighway, which include in their definition this idea of national sovereignty. And we think that we need an offensive approach traction and thinks of bonding political and economic agendas in the coming months or years at the EU level. So that are the four main ideas and the conclusion that we had that could frame the debate, and I hope that you will be able to read that in more than 5 minutes in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Nicolas, on some very good thoughts for the participants, and especially for the panelists who are just going to join me after your presentation. I'm sure it's going to inspire them.